Okay, I think we're the last panel before the closing remarks and the reception. So thank you very much to everybody who has stuck around to hear my esteemed panelists speak about technology and data supporting compliance and governance. I'm Jennifer Saperstein. I am the co-chair of Covington's Anti-Corruption and Corporate Compliance Practice, and I'm delighted to be here with this terrific group today to talk about technology and data in compliance and enforcement. I, over the years, have gotten a lot of questions from clients who are interested in years ago, the past 5 years or so, how they should be using data in their compliance programs, particularly after the Department of Justice Criminal Division amended its compliance guidance to add a lot of questions that really focused on data and the use of data and access to data. And I still get those questions today, but increasingly the question we hear from clients is, what about AI? Are your clients using it in their compliance programs? What type of technology is available? Everybody, I think AI is on everybody's mind. We've heard about it a little bit today. And so while we're here to talk about technology generally in compliance programs, we are going to spend a fair amount of time on AI. And when you hear the background of my esteemed panelists, I think you'll understand why. So with that, I'm going to go down the table and ask each of the panelists to do a brief introduction, please.
My name is Taka Riga. I'm the AI guy. I'm a rookie to this conference, so thank you very much for having me. I was formerly the Chief AI Officer and the Chief Data Officer for the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. These days I have my own firm helping organizations connect the aspirations of AI with value-based outcome of what the reality can actually deliver.
Hi, my name is Yuji Kira. I'm the partner of the PwC Japan's Forensic Service, leading forensic technology and the corporate intelligence practice.
Hi everybody, I'm Vince Walden. I'm CEO of Kona AI. We are a SaaS fraud risk and compliance software company helping do continuous controls monitoring and investigative support.
I'm Yoshika Tsurai, technical fellow of Frontier Inc. And I started development 2007, especially for the forensics and e-discovery technology, focusing on Chinese, Japanese, Korean language. Yeah, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Vince, I'm going to start with you because you've created this very helpful slide around defining artificial intelligence. And I think, perhaps AI means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and it's a broad concept. And so perhaps you can do some level setting on some of these different concepts.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Actually, all due credit goes to, I think, IBM, who gave me the inspiration. They did something like this slide, and I thought, this is a really good slide. When we talk about AI, I hear so many companies, hey, we need to think about AI in compliance, or how are we using AI? And it was so important to define. It's like saying the internet, or an internet company. Well, what's an internet company? I mean, that can be anything, right? It was helpful to kind of set the framework, and I'd like to have the panel also comment. But when we think about what is AI, well, AI has been around for 20, 30 plus years. This is nothing new. The machine learning. Remember, we've all done, finding more like this with emails, and and also with transactions. Deep learning and a lot of the pattern and link analysis and hidden relationships between disparate data sources. You think about what Palantir does really well. That's a lot of the deep learning and the pattern matching. Now, what is kind of a big deal, and everybody's been the hype since November 2022 when it came out, I think, but is generative AI, the ability for AI to now create new content, whether that's new content in words or graphics or pictures. The ChatGPT world is the generative AI. So when we hear about all the hype of AI, we're pretty much probably talking about generative AI. And interestingly, now, and what I'll get into later, what I think the future really is in applicability for compliance is agentic AI, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is even the next thing. And I can guarantee you in 2 or 3 years, if not 2 or 3 months, there's going to be some other word that the industry's gonna come up with, or innovation, that we'll be calling it that too. So you can bet this is gonna change. Hopefully it's not general AI, which we could probably talk about more, but when we get to general AI, that's where we're in trouble, because that's a human, I think. But any comments? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there are so this is a question that if you ask 10 data scientists what AI is, you'll get 50 different answers. Part of the reason is that if you just look at all the regulatory definition of AI, it doesn't matter what it is, EU AI Act, Colorado AI Act, California's SB 53, even at the federal level here in the United States, the National Defense Authorization Act of 2019. You read those definitions, they're very poetic. They may even be Shakespearean. But as a data scientist, I read those definitions, I have no idea what AI is supposed to do, right? So these are not technical definitions of AI, they're much more abstract, outcome-oriented. And depending on how you want to fit your product, you might even suggest an Excel macro fits under the existing definition of AI. So there's a reason why everyone will have like a different interpretation of what AI does, and it doesn't help that there's different flavors of AI, and a lot of applications are either narrowly focused, and these days we talk about like artificial general intelligence or artificial superintelligence. I think those are categorically still in the research lab, but they are coming at some point.
I'm going to stick with you, Taka, before we move on to how this works in practice, and some of the new tools that our other panelists will talk about. But you've written about different archetypes of AI, and I thought it was a really interesting piece to read, and I'm hoping you can tell our audience about those different archetypes that you've categorized.
Yeah, happy to. I'm going to make assumptions that most of us have seen that movie Lord of the Rings. So when we talk about AI, we often talk about the AI, like just like one ring that rules them all. But in fact, there are 5, I think, common different types of AI. I think most of us are familiar with ChatGPT, Perplexity, things that you use browser to access. That may be the most familiar, but for most organizations, that is perhaps the most problematic one, right? This is where you get examples of lawyers citing fictitious cases. This is where you get into trouble when chatbots are hallucinating. This is where you're uploading non-public sensitive information just because you want the content to be summarized or rewritten. But those are the most familiar ones. The second archetype is what I call general purpose productivity. So think Microsoft Office 365. You now have Copilot attached to Excel, to PowerPoint, to Teams that you can summarize and transcribe your meetings. You can talk about the kind of analytical pivot that you want to do in Excel, and we'll do it for you. But those 2 categories of AI are general purpose. They don't know that you are lawyers, they don't know that you're a governmental official, they don't know that you are accountants, etc. Most of my energy is spent on dealing with a third archetype. How do we develop bespoke solutions to serve a very specific function? So when I was at Office of Personnel Management, we were developing AI use cases to streamline the federal hiring experience. Why do we do that? Because there's no commercially available tool to specifically meet that demand. And I see a lot of law firms these days are developing their own in-house bespoke solution, partially to protect the confidentiality of the client data, but also there may be very specific compliance question that is not always appropriate to ask ChatGPT. The fourth archetype is something that's much more narrowly focused. Think Grammarly, think Canva, right? Grammarly is really good at correcting your grammar, but it certainly is not going to ask like a legal reasoning on my behalf. So they're very specifically tailored. And then the last archetype I'll just touch on is maybe more counterintuitive. And as a chief AI officer, this is the one that kept me up at night. I call these the surprise AI, right? Every now and then I turn on my laptop, and all of a sudden I get a notification that says, would you like to try this AI feature in this product that we didn't ask for, we didn't even know we bought it, but somehow because of the hype cycle, every product vendor wants to be associated with AI. So they turn these features on, and as a governmental agency, now we're scrambling to deal with the risk management, cybersecurity procurement, technology issue on things that we didn't necessarily know was coming. Not that we oppose to the future, but as a governmental entity, we don't like to be surprised. And so those are the kind of 5 common archetypes I think most organization goes through. And if you sort of break that into those 5 distinct archetypes, you can have a much more rational conversations around value, risk, and cost, as opposed to the one AI that can serve different functions.
That's really helpful, and I think this is a really good grounding for where I want to go next, which is to ask the panelists, what are some common technology tools that companies are using in investigations and compliance? And I know some of you have developed those tools, offer those tools to clients, and so Shirai, let me start with you. The slides have changed here, but not on the screen. Bear with us a moment. So I think you're going to speak about a new AI solution that Frateo has, and we're okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So yeah, today I will explain our new solution. But before that, next page, please. Yeah, this is actually a traditional type. We call this our own technology, Kibit AI. And as you know, forensics review and e-discovery review, when we use AI in the past, at first we need training data for the specific matter, very early case, and we have to provide prepare the training data to learn AI. So that's actually after that we have some process and to targeting the unknown documents and AI scoring like this, and from the high score documents to low score, we can prioritize document. That's a very traditional type. And again, we need a training data set at first. That's a kind of a time consuming. When we start a case, everybody very busy. But we want to use AI, it takes time to prepare training data. Next page, please. And this is actually issue of the typical e-discovery workflow. At first, we prepare the search terms to narrow down the documents, target documents. And again, training data we need. And especially for early stage, so generative AI changed the world a little bit. So we ask generative AI which kind of document we need. We input as a prompt type of questionnaire. Then we can get easy. However, next page please. However, generative AI need something we need to prove and get agreement with our clients. One is a data security issue. So this is that if we prepare enough high performance environment, I mean that a lot of expensive servers, then it works very compatible, very high speed. However, if we cannot prepare such a good environment, it's very slow because that it requires very much calculation power and memories. So that's one thing. And if we have to prepare this our own environment, that the cost issue happen. So that's why I would like to propose that the hybrid type with using a traditional type AI, small AI. Actually, our Kibit AI is needs a very small CPU power, like i5, very cheap PC is enough to work for that targeting that like 40 document level. That's enough and very fast response. Next please. And actually, we use this as a prompt type solution we developed, and actually 40K emails. And after this test, actually in actual case, finally we found hot documents 800 and relevant 1,800. And but very early stage, just a prompt. Sorry, that's very much redacted in Japanese. And this is just 3 short sentences prompt. But in top 10, top 100 documents, hot documents included 61, a very high ratio. It's a very helpful for the early case of the investigation. Attorney can capture a hot document a lot, very early, very quickly. Yeah, that's current our proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's really interesting, and I know as technology has increased the speed at which we can go through documents, it's also increased the number of documents that are available, particularly when you're beginning an investigation. And so I think it's really important that we have these technology tools that can help find the relevant documents faster. Ryuichi, I'm going to go to you next to hear from you on what other technology are you seeing and helping your clients use, either on the investigation side or in proactive compliance.
Okay. So a lot of people, have touched AI and new technology, and then in this, risk management area, this AI, new technology, has become the one of the probably main tool we can say to help us process a lot of data or investigate. And so, here the people come from a corporate background, like legal, or the service provider, forensic service provider like us, or the government. But application of these new technologies, including AI, is different depending on where you come from and where you are actually. And the mentality is different, the rules are different. So, for example, in a common, purpose that we use new technologies, basically the AI can help us do things quickly, efficiently, and economically, and more accurately, I guess. So that's the main purpose, but how we use it, or the mentality is really different in a different industry. So for example, my industry, which is the service provider, we help the corporation or law firm to investigate internal wrongdoings. And one example of the usage of AI is when we investigate, we collect the data from, for example, from the phone. Last I checked, today, I have about 40,000 pictures, 40,000. So assuming that I spend 1 second per picture to basically make a judgment if this is somehow related to the investigation or not. Going through 40,000 pictures takes probably 11 hours, 12 hours maybe. Assuming that I don't have any breaks, any vacation. And then, but it takes 11 hours. But
At PwC rates.
it is very expensive, right? And but people get tired and people make mistakes. But if we let the AI to process the images, it takes a few minutes, and it almost has a 99% accuracy. It can basically categorize the picture containing text, or the handwritten text, or printed text, or the rest of the pictures. It's very accurate, and then AI doesn't get tired. So it can produce the result very quickly and very efficiently. And then other things when we did the investigation, maybe several years ago, we had hundreds and hundreds of hours of audio recordings. But at that time, there's no good technology to convert the voice into the text. So we basically use people, let them have them listen to it, and then transcribe the audio into the text. And then by the time they finish the job, they're almost dead because it's just a really, really, really difficult job to do. But by using the AI, which is supported, by the generative AI, this can be done in a very, very short period of time. And then it now has the accuracy that we can rely on when we do an investigation. So this technology, AI, makes a big difference in the investigation that we do. And then, but one thing that I need to mention is that in a legal environment, which probably requires the very strict, legal requirements, the application of this Gen AI posing some issues that we all have to be probably aware. So I would say like back in 2009, that's the year that the predictive coding or the technology assisted review was introduced to the market. And I think that 2012 is the first year that the actual court approved the usage of predictive coding by the Judge Pat, I think. So it was almost like 13, 14 years ago. But it takes like 3-4 years to get the court to approve the application of the predictive coding. And then now, this Gen AI supported technologies out there. But there's an argument, for example, if the council produced documents explaining that, okay, this tool, like Gen AI is great, all these documents look very relevant and hot for the matter that they're discussing. And then this is all picked by the Gen AI, and it looks relevant, it looks great. But the problem is, this technology is still black box. And we cannot really explain how this Gen AI picked those documents. So I think this is more the argument, by the councils, like how it can be like challenged in a court if the document is submitted, which is picked by the Gen AI. So I guess you can probably comment on that.
I'll just add, additional challenge here is, as human beings, we're all used to a deterministic view of the world. Excel is great. Zeros and one, black and white, never changes. But when it comes to Gen AI, the answer you get on Monday is probably different than the answer you're going to get on Thursday. So how do you actually capture that evidentiary kind of standpoint to be able to replicate, by opposing counsel or some other sort of independent agency? So that's one issue. There's a lot of emerging, I think, techniques that you can apply to make the reasoning of Gen AI more understandable. But that also means law firms and regulators needs to develop the muscle memory to sort of take care of these what we call inherently governmental functions. And we need to understand how it works. We need to understand the techniques that we can apply to make sure that we are ensuring the kind of transparency and accountability and not just necessarily rely on black box. Because if we continue to do that, I absolutely agree we're going to run into sort of core challenges.
Yeah. And I would say from a black box perspective, it's still up to the individual. You're not being replaced with a bot because the AI, the generative AI will give you an answer, but it better cite what page and reference number, etc. it's driving its conclusions on, and it's up to you to determine what the document is. If it helps you get to a smoking gun document faster, that's great because the document is the proof. How you got to it necessarily may not matter. The document is the document. So if it helps you do that, that's great, but don't rely on the answer without doing your homework.
Trust but verify.
Yeah, trust but verify.
Yes.
Just a comment, sorry, a comment on the black box issue. I was with a couple of federal judges, including Judge Beck, by the way. And there was a conversation about a federal judge saying, explain to me why generative AI is any more black box than the human brain.
Oh,
And then when you can explain that to me, then explain to me why people shouldn't be using it. So it just gives there is that dichotomy of, do you wait till a judge, like you did with predictive coding?
Just a bit of a sidebar, because we have a lot of regulators in today's conference talking about the use of AI in regulatory enforcement actions. And when I worked at the legislative branch agency, there's a lot of energy focused around regulations of AI. When I work at the executive branch agency, there's a lot of energy implementing AI. But I do believe at a personal level, ultimately it is the judiciary that will end up adjudicating cases related to AI, whether that's IP, whether that's harm, whether that's disparate impact. And I haven't seen the judiciary build up the sort of capacity to not only use but also understand how to interpret that. And similarly, in my conversation with many law firms, there's sort of varying degree level of maturity on how the law firm themselves are applying. So I think this may be a sort of interesting frontier to say, if all the cases are going to end up in the courts, how do we build the judiciary capacity to sort through these maybe variable answers that we get?
They're using it. They're just waiting for approval. So yeah, same group of judges that said they're actually writing letters up the chain saying we need these tools, but I'm using it anyway. My clerks are using it anyway until we get that authorization.
Yeah, on that point, when I was at OPM, we knew anecdotally people were using it. We just didn't know how much. So I asked my sister to do a network scan. We identified 55 separate services of AI people were using that were unauthorized. We just thought it was ChatGPT and Perplexity, like maybe a handful, but it was 55. I even had a CFO once show me on his phone, knowing that the agency didn't authorize it, a sort of result of a pre-decisional document. And I nearly fainted when I saw that, right? So people are using it, and so it behooves us for the policy and the governance process to catch up and evolve alongside.
Well, let me move. I think we could probably do an entire day on governance around AI. And also, I mean, we're here to talk about technology in compliance programs. There's a whole other conversation to be had about the compliance risks and governance issues using this same technology. But on the more positive side, to focus on the benefits and sort of leave some of the risks for later. Vince, I know you have or are working on some new tools related to AI in proactive compliance programs, and I'm hoping you could spend a few minutes talking about that.
Yeah, let me ask the group, how many of you have been asked by your boss to do more work with the same or less resources? Has that ever happened? You have more work, but I'm not giving you any more people or resources. That happens a lot, right? Now, if you could hire 5 people or 6 people on your compliance team right now, think about who would you hire? If money wasn't an issue, who would you hire? So I pose this because we think about generative AI, and again, the new talk is agentic AI. Get ready for the AI employees. And whether it's me or anybody else, this will happen. And you will be using this probably in the next 1 to 2 years, if not, whether your company's pushing this out or not. But there are AI assistants now that will do a variety of tasks. Now, interestingly, I have my own assistants. I've got a team of 6 bots. One looks at my email and knows my writing style and creates draft emails for me to respond. One looks at my social media and knows my social media style and prepares blogs for me. And social media posts. One gives me legal advice, which I don't really comply on too much, but it says, give me a standard work plan or whatever, and it's kind of interesting to see. These are bots that help me in an administrative task. Now, I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, what about compliance or internal audit or finance? Interesting. So the only thing that I've done differently is I put names to them. As opposed to sounding geeky, let's make them personal. So think about this concept, and I'd love to get the panel's thought, but so Eva has been trained, and you talk about small language models. Okay, this is an LLM, small language model. Specifically, they're called RAGs, Retrieval Augmented Generation, but it's a small model of just all the last 5 years of your internal investigations data, plus whatever DOJ, SFO guidance you put in there. Stan has been loaded with all your third-party due diligence data from LexisNexis, Thomson Reuters, you name it, for the last 10 years, every background check of every third party you've done business with. Helpline. So Sunny has been loaded with Navex and whatever, all the hotline and help data that you've loaded for the last 10 years or whatever, anything on Helpline. Salesforce monitoring, the sales team, where they're going, and who's getting paid. policy, all your company policies are in there. Now Penny controls and looks at all these so that you can ask in your bot, so like there's a picture of Stan on the right, third-party risk. If I ask Eva, hey Eva, write me an investigative work plan for a conflicts of interest case in Brazil with these 4 companies and these 3 employees where they're alleged. Eva will easily be able to talk to Stan, because it's third party, pull up all the background checks on those vendors, give you a work plan of here's what a conflicts of interest case would be in this country, be aware of these 5 things, here's what the vendors are doing, and by the way, those employees, 2 of them were investigated previously. Now, I could remember all that in my head if I worked for the company for the past 10 years, but maybe not. But these bots know everything about those historical cases because they've been loaded with them in their little small language model. That is powerful. And one person has now the power of these 6 bots at their service, at their deployment. So, oh, I don't know the answer to that. Go ask Stan, the bot. That, I think, is how, again, I'm guessing, but we're getting great feedback on this concept. And in our testing, these bots, you as an OpenAI enterprise, this is not going out to ChatGPT. You cannot ask Eva what the weather is tomorrow. She will not know because she's not OpenAI. She's only trained on the data that you fed her. So it's not going out to the public. But I kind of think that this is the direction we're heading. And I just wanted to get this team's input and this panel's input of, AI assistants, they're assistants. And they don't take holidays.
Yeah, I agree with Vince's point. In my intro, I mentioned I was the Chief AI Officer and the Chief Data Officer at the Office of Personnel Management. That's because I actually believe AI should be an extension of data, not a class of technology. When we start treating AI as a class of technology, we run into trouble, right? We run into issue with not able to recognize hallucination. We run into context issue where you ask a question and you get maybe 60% response out of it. And so now maybe you have more confusion, less clarity. It all, I think, boils down to the quality of that information. Before the session, we were talking about, many Japanese firms is still relying on documents, for survey, for other purposes. Well, if you don't somehow digitize that and feed that through retrieval augmented generation into these AI models, AI is not going to help you, right? So how do we make sure that in order for the AI journey to be successful, get the data governance journey successful?
Well, that's a good segue into, there's a lot of promise, there's a lot of technology that's already there and a lot that's coming, but what are some of the common concerns companies have about using AI or other technologies? And one is we just don't have our data digitized, and that may be a place you need to start. But Shira, you were talking a bit about privacy concerns when we spoke ahead of the panel, and maybe you can say a word about those types of concerns that you've encountered companies express.
So especially for Japanese and Korean companies, they are very much sensitive about transfer of data. So that's why even a private cloud, they hesitated to use that tools. So that's a very much challenging point. And even if that contract said that never disclose or never transfer other location, but people don't believe that. Yeah, but very much sensitive things and emotional things, I think.
Yeah. Well, let me ask the rest of the panel, open it up to the rest of you. How have you helped clients get over that concern and get comfortable using some of these tools that you are offering to clients or have advised clients on using?
I'll go quickly. Interesting, a realization that I just had only months ago was, wow, compliance professionals don't usually have the carte blanche access to the ERP systems of the entire company because they're not IT and they're not finance. So let's focus on the data that you control. What does compliance professionals control? They control the survey data, the hotline data, the policies and procedures data. There's plenty of historical great data that they can use to start building these LLMs themselves. Eventually, they should. We talked about compliance monitoring and looking for improper payments. It's funny, my whole business model was based on getting data out of ERP systems and invoices and purchase orders. And it's still very, very important. But in the meantime, let's focus on the data that you can have access to now. Your your employee survey data, your policies, your helpline data, your investigations data. That's all stuff that you guys own and have access to. Let's get that into the LLMs and start helping us be more efficient.
And some of that data may be less sensitive from a privacy perspective or a privileged perspective than other data. And that's as a practical tip, one place for companies to start if there's significant privacy concerns is start with some of the data that's easier, either because you have a clean data set, you're not as worried about privacy, and you can sort of start based on some of those considerations.
Yeah, I remember having a drink with Fukami-san at a restaurant, and I think the key here is the concept of agile governance, because we're all in the business where we don't get to say, oops, I violated your privacy, oops, I violated your confidentiality, especially governmental entity, right? I always jokingly say I always have my resume updated because I am one Wall Street Journal controversy away from having to resign as the chief data officer. But governance usually is think of as a sort of a dragging force on innovation. So if you can structure that governance in an agile way to move at the speed of innovation, I actually think that is the secret sauce to accelerating adoption of AI. Now, of course, easier said than done, right? You gotta have a sort of team player mentality, you have to have data access, there are a lot of procurement, technical, data-related issues that needs to go along the way. But I think we successfully piloted that approach when I was at Office of Personnel Management. We met every other week to address all the use cases, and we were empowered to make decisions despite the uncertainties. And I think that's a necessary element for us to sort of drive that adoption.
Well, we've started to touch on this topic too, but I think another common concern that I hear from companies is just, it's all overwhelming. Where do I start? And I heard this concern 5 years ago when we were talking about data analytics in compliance programs, not even getting to AI, and I certainly hear it now. And so again, I'll open it up to the panel. Where do you start? If you're a company that's not yet, you've dipped your toe into data analytics, or you're using data analytics but you've not yet dipped your toe into AI, how do you start?
Start from Kona AI?
Yeah. Here's $20. No, I say don't start with the data. Data analytics does not start with data. Let that sink in. It starts with your risk assessment. Yeah, because if you're doing data analytics on the wrong thing, who cares? And so take a look at your risk assessment. Now, if you haven't done a risk assessment, let's not talk about data, because get your risk assessment done and then we'll talk. But I think it starts with your risk assessment, and then there you have a reasonable case and a defensible case to go do something that's meaningful to the business to mitigate that risk. And then you start thinking about the low-hanging fruit.
Right, I agree with that. Risk assessment, it's not a textbook answer, but it is true, because a lot of Japanese companies, contact us, hey, where do we start? Like, what can I do? Like, those people have some ideas. Like, some people have a bad experience in harassment issues, then they go to the harassment issue. But the thing is, harassment has some impact to the company, but not so much, compared with the FCPA, like anti-corruption or antitrust. But they still want to spend lots of money to analyze their communication data to come up with the any potential harassment messages or text signature. So we always recommend you should start from the risk assessment, and then they go like, really? It's like every textbook I read, it says risk assessment, but we still really don't believe that that's gonna be the right approach. So we always try to convince them to start from there, because it is the right approach.
I might take a little bit of a contrarian view to this. I say start with the problem. What is the problem that you're looking to solve? And does that problem require AI to solve it? Because AI comes with this whole host of issues, right? You have technology issue, you have cost issue, you have sort of IT issue, you have governance issue. But 9 out of 10 times, when I was at GAO, I led the innovation lab. Counterintuitively, I measure my success by telling my customers no. Right? Because not every nail requires an AI as a solution. I much rather think about the whole life cycle to say, it's easy enough for me to spin up a prototype. Anybody can do that. But how do I then scale those prototypes into a production solution that can serve the enterprise? That's a different conversation. And when I was at GAO, the agency could only productionize one solution per year. That's it. AI or no AI. Right? So what is the point of having 20, 30, 40 different AI use cases that will have no viability going forward? And to me, that is a classic definition of wasteful spending. So really think about that life cycle process and say, what is the problem that we're trying to solve, and does it require AI?
And that problem was your risk assessment. I've seen, like for example, like Kona AI sometimes is the solution to the company's third highest priority, not the number one priority. And it's like, well, they're not going to buy it until it's the number one priority, you know. And so, you know, I don't want to be the third. I don't want to be the solution to your third priority. I want to be the solution to your number one priority. But until we get the risk assessment, we won't know. Or instead of saying risk assessment, it's your prioritization list of what we look at. Please go ahead.
So I completely agree, Vincent, that start from risk assessment. But one thing, exceptional thing, I think, for example, we provide that email auditor 2013 we released because of the strong demand from the one company who was investigated by DOJ cartel matter. So they have to report what's their prevention program, compliance program to prevent that repeatedly happen cartel matter. So that's why they investigated and they have the training data already to fed to AI. So that's why we can easily provide that AI system to monitor emails. Yeah, that's a exceptional thing, I think.
I have a few more questions for the panel, but let me pause. I'm mindful of time and I want to make sure we have time for audience questions. So let me pause and see if there are any questions in the audience.
While folks are thinking, I might add one more point to say, AI is digital capabilities. We shouldn't just use it to automate analog process that were broken to begin with, right? Most organizations don't necessarily think about the courage to reimagine what that status quo should have been. So whether it's email review, whether it's document review, whether it's compliance review, I always advocate, now that you have adopted new capability, now reimagine what that workflow might look like.
Yeah, in the back, go ahead.
So I am like really not technological, as anyone who knows me would know. So I have a naive question, which is one thing I don't quite understand. I'm really interested in how you can use AI for compliance. But my understanding is we're not yet all that 100% confident about using our internal reporting data, you know, analog, to distinguish between good reports and bad reports. There's a lot of false negatives, there's probably some false positives. So if you're not really sure if the system you've been using to sort is so accurate, do you have to worry that those inaccuracies get built into the generative AI when you go to train the AI on, let's say, how to sort internal reports? I mean, I don't know how you make AI better than the humans. It's a naive question, but I don't really.
Yeah, my sort of generalized response to that is AI is not that automatic. There are a lot of configurable parameters. So for example, you can, ChatGPT out there is well known to have these sycophantic behavior. It will say, oh, that is a great question. You are so smart. Keep going. Because they want you to keep engaging with ChatGPT. But you can configure that for corporate purposes. Dial down the creativity, dial down the toxicity. You can specifically train them on the corpus of pharmaceutical data to be more contextually relevant. Working with a client that's using the concept of taxonomy as a metadata to increase that context and accuracy. Because this is an area where false positive is so expensive, right? You identify a case of sort of misdeed and you end up launching an investigation and turn out to be nothing. The cost of that is very high. So there are, and that's why I emphasize the need for building that organizational muscle memory so that you actually know how to configure these systems to support the function that you're trying to do.
And I'll answer just a quick comment on that. The ideal the ideal RAG model is your historical company data plus industry guidance. So no one's going to argue with the DOJ and SEC and all the settlement agreements loading that in as a point of reference, as well as the ECTA, as well as the UK Corporate Transparency Act and WCCP for the DOJ. Those are all authoritative documents. I got them all in that order. But loading up your data plus authoritative documents into the LLM is a great place to start. Will it be perfect? No, because at the end of the day, the human still has to validate the answer.
So, very, very, very interesting. I want to connect this conversation back to cultural difference section. So for example, different compliance training could be used for effective in culture A, but maybe not B. And it seems to me that in principle, it's possible to train blank LLM with, say, 10 years worth of newspapers from several big cities in the United States as opposed to the Japanese city, and to see how trainable those agents could be depending on,
Sure.
training.
You're thinking about it the right way. Yeah.
Is that already feasible or realistic?
Yes.
And if so, how expensive?
The short answer is yes. I recently submitted a proposal exactly to that for a multinational looking to train compliance program. Right, this is multinational, so jurisdictionally they operate in very different places. We've probably all heard of the concept of using AI to generate deepfake. Well, this is the reverse of that. You can generate variation of the same. This is a variation of the sort of training program that are culturally aware, perfect translation, and you can quickly do that. I think that's what Matt was saying earlier. Andrew McBride was saying the cost of doing that is so much lower. And if you can then integrate that to, for example, something like augmented reality, now you have a more of an immersive way to train as opposed to here is a sort of PowerPoint-driven approach to training. So that is the reality today. Are there a lot of organizations that are adopting that approach? As with any technology, it takes a while for that adoption curve to happen, but the technology reality is here.
That was a great idea.
Let's do it.
Lily, that's the last question.
Hi, we've talked a lot about the use cases of AI to help with investigations, but I'm sort of curious on if you've noticed any trends or have any concerns regarding investigation of AI data, so like the day-to-day use and sort of the applicability of that type of data in investigation.
I think there are certainly a lot of news headlines talking about lawyers citing the fictitious cases, things like that. And I think that's a cautionary tale to say, don't use ChatGPT for everything, because you shouldn't be surprised that it's learned on the best of Wikipedia, Reddits, and YouTubes of the world, and that may not necessarily be the sort of appropriate way to sort of address sensitive legal matter. There's certainly a lot of companies that are out there offering sort of like audit and governance kind of capabilities. Say, how do you audit the reasoning? How do you audit the data lineage? And so I think all of that goes towards sort of augmenting the trust of that response. And I think generally the term is called observability. Are you able to observe in which the AI model is retrieving certain information, making certain reasoning, come back with a response? When I was at GAO, that was a required element because auditors are a skeptical bunch. We have an agency full of auditors. Their job is to tell you what you did wrong. So they don't trust anything that is automatic. They require that reasoning. And so again, I go back to that sort of muscle memory to say, don't just trust sort of blanket response, have a user experience to build in the kind of reasoning, the citation, whatever else that's required for that particular function.
Thank you very much to this terrific set of panelists. We could probably keep talking for another hour, but you know, we are at the end of, near the end of the day, and not much stands between you and drinks and food. So thank you all for sticking with us till the end, and we will get almost to the end right now.